Skift events are where we bring the breadth of our editorial coverage to life, and Skift Global Forum is the epitome of this, the culmination of all things Skift on one stage. I can't wait to chat with all the top CEOs from Marriott to JetBlue, Expedia, Wyndham, Booking, and more about all the latest travel happenings. Be a part of the conversation and reserve your seat today at live.skift.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Skift Travel Podcast. I am Skift's editor-in-chief, Sarah Kopit, here as always with Seth Borko, Skift's head of research. Hey, Seth.
Hey, Sarah. How's it going?
Good. So today we are not in founder mode. We are not in manager mode. We are in both podcast mode and global forum mode. It is September, and here today to talk all about it is Dennis Schaal. Hey, Dennis, how you doing?
Hey, Sarah, how's it going? Nice to be here for a change.
Yeah. So Dennis put out a fantastic piece on Airbnb 1 year later after being de facto banned from New York City. And Dennis, as most of our, Skift superfans know, is what your employee number one, founding editor. What other superlatives for Skift do we have for you?
None. That is enough.
That is enough.
I would add most interested man at Skift, by the way. I don't know how many of our super fans know this behind the scenes story, but if you see Dennis at the Global Forum, you should ask him about his career before journalism. Fascinating.
Agree. So we're going to have that as kind of a little teaser. So you'll have to come buy your tickets. And also a quick reminder before we get started to send any questions that you might have to us at podcast@skift.com. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you're enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars and leave us a positive review so we can spread the word all about the Skift Travel Podcast. So with that, we're going to get started. Seth, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about all things Dennis, all things Global Forum. We're going to talk a little bit about all things Dennis, right? All things... It's our spinoff from the NPR show, of course. No, we're excited to be doing the Global Forum. Dennis, you've probably been at every single Global Forum. Is that right?
Indeed, I have since day one. First one was in the New York Times building.
New York Times building, and now we're Glass House, right? I got that right?
Yep, you did.
Well, look, every year we pick a theme for the Global Forum. And, we don't necessarily hammer the audience over the head with the theme, but it is in the back of our minds as we think about all of our programming decisions and all of our moderating decisions. And this year's theme is Travel's Great Renewal. I just wanted to ask you, Dennis, and all of us can jump in. I'll jump in. Sarah can jump in. But Dennis, what does that mean to you, the idea of Travel's Renewal? Does that mean anything to you, Dennis?
Yeah, for me, it's both the opportunity and the challenge. So what it made me, when I read it, what it made me think about at first was, I go back to a story that Barry Diller and Dara Khosrowshahi told about the aftermath of September 11th. They were at a company called USA Networks, which became IAC. And right before September 11th, they had a deal to acquire Expedia. And September 11th came, the travel industry shut down, there was fear all over the place. They had to decide whether travel was still a good bet. And they gathered around a boardroom somewhere around a table, and someone said it, and for some reason they never identify who said it, but someone said, without travel, there is no life. And we've seen that after the pandemic. I mean, what did people do? People were crazy to travel. We saw the revenge travel trend. Even when there were hints of a recession, people kept traveling, So here we are. It's 2 to 3 years late after the pandemic. Travel is normalizing, right?
Yep.
There's an opportunity for renewal. I mean, we have, Gen AI. Is Gen AI going to make travel planning easier? Is it going to make it easier when you're at the destination? One thing that really excited me was there was an announcement by ChatGPT a few months ago that they're about to come out with some kind of new language feature, translation feature that, would be way better than Google Translate. You'd be able to translate conversations in real time as they're happening, so that would be a game changer.
That, I mean, we really are getting into kind of a science fiction level
Yeah.
era here with this. I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, always have been, and like it was one of the great kind of awe-inspiring things about that show was like the universal translator. There was no need for anybody to learn a different language. It just the computer did it, and that was science fiction. But it's basically here, right?
Yeah.
That would be such a game changer if something like that happened.
I
Bringing
know,
people
right?
together. Yeah.
We're getting close.
Yeah, because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm doing I'm doing this podcast through my AirPods, right? So we already all have something in our ears so often now that's kind of talking directly to us. So it's like we're just like that little leap. It's a very small leap.
Well, and the translation stuff has gotten so good.
Yeah, exactly.
I talk to people. I'm planning a trip to Japan for after the Global Forum. The number one piece of advice people give me is, "Oh, just make sure you have your phone on you." And yeah, no one really speaks English, but it's okay. You can just point your phone at a menu and you'll figure it out. No problem. I use it every day. And so it's a very small, like exactly. It's a very small leap between we have speech to text, we have translation, we have devices in our ears. I mean, maybe not this year, but coming soon.
Yeah, sooner than we think. So, Dennis, I'm kind of curious, like thinking back as we get closer and closer to Global Forum, I know like panels I'm especially excited about to hear this year, some of which, I'm going to be moderating myself, some of which other people are. I'm curious, like looking back at the past 12 years for you, what are some of the standouts that you've had over the years, not only as a moderator, but, people that you've seen on stage, news that has been broken. What are the ones that jump to mind as the skiftiest, the best of?
Yeah, I think more about ones that, not breaking news, but more the funnier ones or the interesting ones.
Yeah.
So three of them come to mind to me. One was our former hotel reporter interviewed the CEO of Wyndham, Jeff Bellotti. He's speaking this year. And she was talking to him about all the cool brands that are out there in travel, all the boutique hotel brands. And she said to him, and this is great about Skift Global Forum. Our interviews aren't advertorials. So she said to him, "Why is it that Wyndham's brands are just so not cool?" You know, and he and he of course, defended himself, and defended the brands and everything, but he wouldn't drop that thought for the entire interview. He kept repeating, "And we're so cool because of this. So cool because of that." And then he ended up saying, "Yeah, and we're trying to attract millennials, and we're trying to recruit design firms that could really, redo our designs to make it really cool." And he just went with that the entire time. Another one was the most fun interview I ever did was I wrote this online travel history, and
Yeah.
I had the founder of Priceline, Jay Walker, the Expedia CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, the founder of Expedia, Rich Barton, and Brad Gerstner, who was an investor and, on the ground floor of Orbitz and stuff like that. And Jay Walker talked about going in to talk to Bob Crandall, who was this legendary American Airlines CEO, to talk to him. This is like 1996 or 1998, to talk to him about the internet, what was coming with the internet, and trying to get American Airlines to participate in Priceline, which was going to sell flight tickets on the internet. Before that, it was just sold by travel agents. And Bob Crandall said to him, "Jay, nothing personal, but we'd be better off if you were hit by a truck." And that was a poignant moment. And American Airlines refused to participate, and the next day a whole bunch of other airlines canceled. Probably Crandall called them up. So there's been a lot of fun moments like that.
American Airlines still to this day picking some fights over its distribution strategy too. By the way, we were just talking about that on our last podcast episode. I think you said you had a third one, Dennis.
The third one was Dara in that same interview talked about, he had just become CEO of Expedia, and he figured, he sells a lot of flights, so he wanted to go make an appointment with an unnamed big time airline CEO. So he called up the CEO's secretary, proposed a date. And the secretary called him back, said, sorry, he's not available that day. So Dara proposed another day, like a month later. No, he's not available that day. So Dara said to her, okay, let's do this. I'm available for the entire next year. I will clear my calendar. Any day he wants to meet with me, I'll be there. I'll fly down. He was unavailable. So airline OTA relationships. That's what that was about.
Well, that is always, speaking of, a classic frenemy relationship, OTA airline relationships is key. And that's a big part of the broader, distribution landscape. And that's something that, Dennis, maybe better than anyone else in the entire travel industry, airlines and hotels and OTAs and how they get together and work together. We're kind of going down memory lane a little bit, but for this year, what are you going to be listening for? And what are the big themes that you want to hear the travel industry sound in on this year? And is distribution going to be one of them?
I was struck by a story we ran last week about the deputy mayor of Athens, who was talking about how climate change has really put his city not out of the tourism business. They're besieged with over-tourism, but the infrastructure just can't take it anymore. So they are doing things like planting trees all over the place and installing fountains, anything to cool the city. So when we're talking about renewal, the great renewal, we're also talking about, in parentheses, and reckoning. So yeah. I'm wondering, if I do have grandkids one day, will they be involved in revenge travel? Will the world be involved in travel, decades from now as much as it is today? So I'm waiting to hear destinations talk about how they're adapting to over-tourism and climate change. Are the recent protests in Mallorca and Barcelona and elsewhere, are they an existential threat to the travel industry or just a momentary blip?
And now the hotel labor strike in the U.S. too. I think the labor and the protest stuff is huge.
Absolutely. And then Gen AI, is it hyperbole? Yeah. Now we're about 2 years in. How is it going to change travel search? I think there's a hearing this week about whether a federal judge is going to break up Google. If that happens, what's going to happen to travel search? How will Gen AI impact Google? Who's going to replace Google? Yeah, a lot going on.
A lot going on at that.
A lot of reckonings and a lot of renewals for sure.
Absolutely.
So why don't we use this as an opportunity to take a quick break, and we will be back with more Dennis on the other side.
Are you tired of sifting through endless resumes looking for the perfect candidate to fill a leadership opening? Skift Executive Search can help. We have an insider view of the travel industry and can leverage both our expertise and connections to find your next rockstar hire. To learn more, visit skift.com/exec-search or email us at execsearch@skift.com.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here still talking about SGF with our friend and colleague, Dennis Schaal. Dennis, I'm curious. Who are you interviewing in a couple of weeks at the Skift Global Forum, and what do you expect to hear from those interviews? Give us a little sneak peek. Give us a little behind-the-scenes info.
So I'm interviewing Ariane Gorin, the new CEO of Expedia, and I'm debating whether I'll have the guts to say to her, Ariane, thanks for being here. Hey, the sisters are in charge now, aren't they? So I'm going to see what she says.
Which way are you leaning on that, Dennis? I'm just curious. Just, no reason. Just curious.
The sisters are in charge. But, if anyone thought that she was going to be some kind of clone or a continuation of Peter Kern, the former
Yeah.
CEO, who's still vice chairman of Expedia. Forget about it. I'll say in my best New York accent.
Yeah.
So she's already making changes. She's halted the rollout of their One Key loyalty program beyond the UK and the US. She's rethinking their brand strategy. I mean, he was all about, consolidating all the teams so that there was like one marketing team instead of each brand having their own marketing team. She's rethinking the whole thing. So I'll be asking her about that. And the other person I'm interviewing is Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking Holdings. And I'm going to be asking them one question that's the same, and that is taking off of what Skift Research wrote a few months ago, which was, the headline was, "The easy money is over in online travel. What comes next?" So where does the growth come from in online travel? Growth is slowing. Is it, I hate to say it, but well, I'll say it. Is online travel another TripAdvisor? I feel like TripAdvisor is a dying brand. I have to say it. That's my opinion.
Actually, Dennis, I'm interviewing Matt Goldberg, the CEO of TripAdvisor. Right. So I'm going to be asking him a little about that, and some of that. I think it's interesting because if growth is slower, then maybe this is a renewal for TripAdvisor. Especially the Google antitrust stuff could be a big renewal for TripAdvisor, tying into that theme. And of course, their experiences businesses. I actually have a number of interviews that are all going to be around, or many of which will be linked to experiences and day tours and multi-day tours in some way, shape, or form. And Viator, which is owned by TripAdvisor, is, I don't know. Yeah, it does tie into the TripAdvisor conversation. We should share. We do trade notes, but we should trade some notes, Dennis.
Yeah, I was thinking that some of your experiences interviews could be really good. You're interviewing in one session Peak, TUI Musement, and McKinsey. Yep. So experiences. Where is the beef? For years and years we heard about mobile. It took about 15 years before mobile took off. For a decade we've been hearing about experiences, and of course we know everyone is looking for experiences rather than luxury necessarily. Although I wouldn't mind a Ritz-Carlton stay every once in a while, but that could be an experience. But has it lived up to the promise? Will it live up to the promise? Airbnb paused their experiences a couple of years ago. They still haven't relaunched it. Supposedly they're going to relaunch it in the fall. But, Glenn Fogel doesn't think it's really that big a business. So
yeah, it's a hard business, right? I mean, I'm doing this session, like you said, with Peak, with TUI Musements, and McKinsey, and we're going to talk about experiences in the kind of consumer mindset. And I also have a session with Get Your Guide, Klook, and Viator, also on day tours and experiences. So I'm definitely in the experiences world for my Global Forum day. Will be full of that. I think, Dennis, I might ask them. I might go to the advisor say, when you talk to, day tour operators, do they say, frankly, we'd like to see you hit by a bus? Is that the conversation?
But what's interesting too is, all the talk about maybe Viator will get spun off, or maybe TripAdvisor will get bought and then spin off Viator. And a lot of people say, hey, pairing Get Your Guide and Viator will be a great win if it would pass, regulatory approval. So it's great. You're going to have them all on the same stage.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Well, over the course of a day, I'll have a lot of these folks. So if people have questions, hey, my email or podcast@skift.com. We can get some questions in the queue potentially, and we usually do take audience Q&A. Sarah, who are you interviewing?
I am interviewing the TSA administrator. I'm interviewing an excellent panel that I'm so excited about on sports tourism, which is just kind of
huge.
I don't know. Yeah, huge right now. And so I'm interviewing the president of the Chargers and the head of Las Vegas's DMO, the guy that makes all of us want to go to Las Vegas, right? Yeah. And I'm interviewing the CEO of Intrepid. I've got a lot of cool stuff going on.
That's really, really cool. Those are It'd be great. The TSA, and we have State Department as well. So we've got a couple of U.S. government people there talking about. I mean, back to your point, Dennis, about climate change and not that the TSA fights climate change, but policy and government and travel are more tightly linked than we'd like to acknowledge sometimes, right?
And there's an election coming up, by the way.
Oh, is there?
Oh, really?
I heard about it.
I hadn't noticed.
That could come up in some way. How will the candidates change the travel industry?
By the way, hopefully all of these CEOs are listeners of the podcast, because if they are, they're going to have a preview of what to expect, right? We typically don't share questions, but hopefully Ariane is subscribed and listening and rating us 5 stars, and she knows what Dennis is going to lead with.
Only 5 stars.
She has to rate us 5 stars, or else she doesn't get any softballs, right?
There you go.
Other than the ones that we are hosting, Dennis, are there any that you saw on the agenda that you're really excited about?
I always like Rafat's interviews with Brian Chesky.
Yeah.
Again, where's the growth going to come from? How did icons, Airbnb, how did Airbnb icons do? That'd be interesting. And I don't know if Rafat will bring it up, but I think last year, one of their big, and you know how they do the summer release and winter release. So private rooms was the big thing about, I think, the summer release of 2023. And between us, I think it was a flop. In a recent earnings call, Brian said, it's growing, but it's really tiny. It really doesn't impact our results, So, when you go on a trip, do you want to stay in a room with the host or in an apartment with the host? I want a little more privacy than that.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah, I can't imagine that, actually. I can't imagine anyone who would want to do that. But that's just me. Anyway, but have you?
Yeah, I have. I did.
What's it like?
It's a little awkward at first, but they're often nice.
Yeah.
But it's a little weird.
Oh my God, it's even worse than I expect. It's like that's like the worst description. I would rather, Anyway, okay. I digress. But I want to ask you more about Brian Chesky and Airbnb, Dennis. We just published a fantastic, opus from you on Airbnb 1 year later after the de facto ban in New York City. I know we're talking about SGF, but can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, give our listeners, if they haven't read it yet, kind of a little taste of what you found. I know you talked to a lot of hosts, you talked to a ton of people. Right. Give us the state of affairs for short-term rentals in New York City now. It's been a year.
One of the surprising things to me was, we knew that Airbnb lost, like 90% of its short-term rental listings. There's only about 3,000 registered hosts. And again, it's you could only stay 2 people max. The host has to be in the apartment. There can be no locks on the bedroom doors. So there's only about 3,000 of them. So the short-term rental listings per se have been decimated by Airbnb. But what shocked me was if you look at their total listings in New York City, they're only down 24%. And that's because a lot of the hosts just switched to rentals of 30 days or more. Okay, so the goal of the city was to free up a lot of this housing stock for long-term housing. And that hasn't happened, because they're not putting it on the market for long-term housing. A lot of people are afraid of squatters. It's really hard to get rid of squatters in New York City. So that hasn't happened. And the hotel industry is booming. Of the top 25 markets in the US, New York City had the number 1 fastest growing RevPAR of any of them. There's a lot of factors at play. It's not just because of short-term rentals. New York City has 16,000 rooms or 18,000 rooms devoted to migrants. So those hotels came off the market. So that's a factor, And then, we've seen small-time hosts are hurting. One person told me about someone she knows who slept in his car for the summer because he needed to rent out his place in order to pay his mortgage, and he had nowhere else to go. And then there are loopholes. So if you're a company like Sonder, which has short-term rentals or condos almost in what are called Class B buildings, you don't have to register. So you can go into New York City and you can rent a Sonder as a short-term rental. It's just like any other short-term rental, really. But they're allowed to keep on doing business where your small-time hosts are left out, basically.
I thought Sonder registered for hotel licenses. Is that?
Well, that's it. Yeah. I think it's pretty much. I think Class B buildings are classified as hotels, if I'm not wrong.
Got it.
Yeah. And I spoke to the guy who wrote the law, Ben Callos, a former councilman, and he said it was his intent to go after the people who, the individual who had 400 listings that was, that was larger than some Marriott and Hilton hotels in the city. It wasn't his intent to go after, small-time individual hosts, but he's happy for, I guess he still believes that some of the Airbnbs turned into long-term housing. He's happy about that. And he's happy about, he's seeing less strangers in his Upper East Side building checking in and checking out on the way to and from the airport, people he didn't know. But it's definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah, I still see a fair number of physical lock boxes hanging on the fences and doors around my neighborhood.
Right.
Definitely.
And there is a Wild West black market going out there. There's all kinds of Facebook groups. For the guest, I mean, you're sending money to somebody you don't know. You don't really know if the apartment really exists. So it's really a crapshoot out there.
Yeah, we love to talk about the guest experience, and I'm sure that sending money to a random stranger on Craigslist is not the guest UX that professionals really are looking for.
Definitely not.
And I mean, we heard our short-term rental summit. We had an amazing panel that me and Sarah, it was on one of our podcasts that we kind of raved about. We both were really impacted by of this these representatives of local single-family housing owners in the outer boroughs of New York City who were really severely impacted by this law, kind of making a very heartfelt case for their need for Airbnbs in general.
Yeah, I spoke to 3 hosts and. All of them basically raved about Airbnb, how Airbnb was so good for them. There was really not much downside. Like a lot of times I hear griping from hosts about Airbnb's customer service stinks, blah, blah, blah. But they were all super positive about Airbnb and how it changed their lives.
Wow. Well, that's a huge story. And if you haven't checked out Dennis's feature, whenever Dennis publishes a feature, it is a guaranteed blockbuster. So make sure you check that out. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Dennis, I kind of have a last question for you, and it's related to all these conversations and the Brian talk and this talk. Do you think there's going to be, I mean, you opened telling us about some of these great fireworks moments of our hospitality reporter calling Wyndham boring and all this stuff. Do you think there's going to be any predictions for a good fireworks moment that we could see at the forum this year?
Well, I'm hoping to get one out of you, some of your experiences panels. Right. I think that could be.
Good answer.
Jeff Bellotti from Wyndham is back. I mean, some of the airlines are going to be talking about all their struggles with getting planes and supply chain shortages. So there could be something there.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I mean, the airline industry we didn't talk about a ton on this podcast, but we've got some really good and pretty outright and outspoken airline speakers as well on the summit this year. So I'm excited about that.
And what about business travel? Is it really back like people are saying it is? Are the front of the planes filled with business travelers again? Or is travel so different now that it's a whole different ballgame?
I suppose it depends what plane you're flying. But yeah, that's a great question. We will be certainly tuning in and in the audience listening for those answers, Dennis. Let's wrap it up there. Dennis Schaal, thank you so much for joining us. And if you are interested in attending the Skift Global Forum, come hang out with me, with Sarah, with Dennis, with all of these CEOs we just talked about. Tickets are still available. We'd love to see you there. And yeah, let us know what questions should we ask on stage. Email us at podcast@skift.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and rate us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. That was fairly painless.
Thank you for listening to the Skift Travel Podcast. Wherever you're listening, please make sure to subscribe. If you like what you're hearing, rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review. It really helps get the word out about us, our podcast, and make sure that we can still continue to bring it to you free of charge every week.
If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell as well. That way you'll know every time we have a new episode.